Welcome to AgriTalk, and thank you for keeping it KTN Farmers TV. Today we have a very interesting conversation. We will be talking about agroforestry, which is a very, I don't think it is a new concept as such, but with me is Chebi Kibet, an environmentalist and botanist, and a PhD researcher with the University of Nairobi. Welcome to the show, Chebi.
Thank you so much.
Just introduce yourself a little bit, tell us what you do and what is agroforestry.
I'm a botanist by education. Then I compounded it more with environment. So it's an environmental botany. And I've been working with trees for almost 15 years. So my work basically mostly was to identify the useful trees that we have in our environment and how we can categorize them for utilization or consumption and also for research. Yeah, so basically I'm a botanist generally, but with the environmental changes, then we have to connect the two.
Okay. If I'm a young man watch or a young person watching from home, and I'm looking for a course maybe in the university, when they say a botanist, what does it entail in details?
Botany is majorly studying of plants, and when you want to maybe apply for a course in botany, you can apply through a Bachelor of Science general course. Then you specialize where you do botany major. You can also combine botany and zoology from third year at the University of Nairobi. But preliminary courses are there for Bachelor of Science general, and it can shape you to be a botanist if you have interest in plants, of which I know many people have a huge interest in plants. And then later you can also specialize to maybe weeds or trees or shrubs or rather general plants, or you can focus on crops.
Okay. Yeah. Now let's dive into the main conversation of the day. When we talk about agroforestry, what is the difference between agroforestry and the normal crop growing that we know?
Agroforestry is an interesting farming system where we emphasize more on growing trees, not just planting trees, and you can see the difference. Growing trees entails nurturing them to be useful to you as you grow your crops. So the choice of the trees matter, because you would not want to have a tree that can not support your crop farming. So we would say that's one aspect of agroforestry. Another aspect is when you grow trees for your livestock farming. So that means you would be focusing on the fodder aspect or the pods, or rather the branches or twigs that can be used by livestock. And the last one could be the combination of all of them, which we normally say agro, silvo, pastoral. So you combine trees, livestock and crops at the same time.
Okay. Let's go back to, you mentioned that the choice of trees is very important. Maybe you can break it down for us or for our viewers. Why is it important to have a right tree at your farm?
First is all these trees differ. Some have huge canopies, and maybe you have a small farm. So if you have a small farm size, you go for the small canopies. And if you have a small farm and you are near maybe a structure or a building, you go for the deep rooted, because normally they would bring down your house. And another factor they should consider is the multi-purpose nature of these trees. It's not important to plant a single purpose tree when you have a multi-purpose tree. And then another one is about the growth. Most of the species, you would go for the fast growing species so that you tap more users as you continue with your crops or livestock farming. So there are so many parameters, and if you are maybe planting near the edges of your farm, you just also plant a tree which has a small canopy, or a tree that can be easily pruned or can easily be propped, so that you avoid conflicts with your neighbors, because some of the trees would spill over to the neighbor farms.
Oh, okay. Maybe you can also go ahead and give us examples of some of these trees, some of the different trees and where they can be grown, so that farmers can know if they're interested in growing trees, what tree do I go for and for which part exactly?
I'll only give few examples. So maybe for silver pasture, where you grow for livestock, then you focus on leguminous trees, which, for example, Leucina, or there's Leucina leucocephala, the white heads. Those ones you can harvest the branches for your livestock. You can also go for, if you are from arid areas, you can go for acacia varieties. You can easily harvest the pods for your livestock. And if, for example, you would want to do like maybe medicinal varieties, where you can grow Wabugia ugandensis, for example, or Prunus africana. This in some aspects, if you use local names, the farmers can easily relate with them. But if you use pure nomenclature, the farmers may not really know this. But if we say Prunus is a very highly medicinal plant, and it's not a robust, vigorously plant. So
Do we have local names?
yeah, we do have local names. So like for Prunus, they call it Mwiri in central parts. I don't know where, but if you go for Bugia ugandensis, some of these medicinal varieties, they call it Mudhiga in these parts of central. So they can easily harvest the barks or even the twigs for teeth or management of fever or so. So some of these farmers actually understand their uses. It's only that we advise them on the right ecological varieties where they should plant them. And we have for the fodder ones, I think the two exotic varieties are good, Leucina and Caliandra, where farmers have been practicing it for a long time. So I think those are the few examples we would go. But in dry areas, so the things change again. In dry areas like Ukambani, you may have the Melia. Melia is a multi-purpose variety for dry areas, especially the eastern areas. You can have the fuelwood, you can have the fodder, and you can also have to benefit your nutrition, the soil nutrition, and also another thing is to change the microclimate of the area.
Okay. I also understand that also the size of the land matters, and also the choice of trees that you plant, depending on the size of your land, really matters. Maybe you can take us through on if I have an acre or a quarter of an acre, what kind of trees I can go for, and for those who have large tracts of land, what they can go for.
For those who have, let's say, large tracts of land, they can go for, you can see in many tea estates. You visit the most tea estates areas. Grevillea has been popular. Grevillea robusta has been popular with these areas. Even Eucalyptus, but there is a controversy now about Eucalyptus tapping more water. So I think that should be avoided. But when you go to local varieties like Macamia lutea, they say it's Ciala in Luo Nyanza, or Luciola in Western. Cordia africana, those are big, huge trees, but they are of huge benefits to the farmers. But for small farmers, they can easily go for some olea species. Of course, they are slow growing, but they take smaller spaces. And the fodder trees, like Sespania sesban, or the Leucina and the Caliandra, those they take small spaces. I think even the famous Meru hawk, the Vitex kenyensis, they do take small spaces, and they avoid maybe planting huge trees like cypress. We've seen farmers planting cypress, cupressus, lusitanica to mark their boundaries. That has been seen to cause conflicts because they spill over to the neighbors. Yeah.
If I take you back to something you mentioned about the eucalyptus, I've also heard a lot about the eucalyptus tree. In parts of Kisii, farmers are being told, those who already had them, to cut them down, and others are being discouraged from growing. What exactly are these disadvantages, apart from just the consumption of water? Is there any other disadvantage? Maybe you can give us both the disadvantage and disadvantages of the eucalyptus tree.
Eucalyptus, First is that the concept of tapping a lot of water and discouraging farmers from planting along the riverbanks. But there is the sensational variety which the farmers wouldn't resist, the South African Eucalyptus grandis. That is fast growing in the nature of eucalyptus, could be 5 years. So for them 5 years is a short time than maybe the rest which have been there for 30 years or 100 years. You've seen the huge eucalyptus varieties. Another one is that once you do, eucalyptus is not fit for small land parcels. Yes, and the leaves that are shaded, it's not easy to do crop farming alongside eucalyptus farming. So if you are interested in intercropping system, then I think it's not the right choice for you. But you can also get farmers, maybe we advise farmers to set aside a small portion of their land, a small parcel, maybe, I don't know, with a percentage that we can give them, just purely for trees. Okay. Yes.
Okay. When we talk about the wattle tree, is it the same as the one they used to plant in Eldoret?
Yes, the one that, I don't know which farm was that, the tanning. Yes. Actually, the reason why the farmers called that farm tanning is because these wattle trees exude tannins. And then they said the sticky material, the sticky substance. What I would like I would say about the acacia is the only, Acacia mianzi is the only acacia remaining in Kenya. The rest, the Botanical Society has commuted all species to other unpopular specific epithets for Kenyans. But they will get used to it in future. If we say the Naivasha-thorn is now Senegalias and the flare, people say, we know it's acacia.
Your names are your botanical names are
so
confusing.
The farmer would say, no, just keep your new name. I would still use acacia, even if it's now an Australian conserved genus. So we would say that some of these exotic species are good. Even these, let's say the Leucina, the Caliandra, they are exotic species and they are very nice species.
Okay. Let me take you back. I'm still trying to wrap my head. When you talk about acacia, yes. You know the acacia we are used to is the acacia we see in arid and semi-arid areas. So when you tell me a wattle tree is still an acacia plant, yes, or acacia tree, yes, I'm lost. How are they related, or they are not even related?
Normally when we tell farmers that this is an acacia, we say it's an acacia mianzi. They would say that why don't we have vigorous thorns and spikes and stuff. Classification of plants is are done based on two features. Morphological, that is their leaves, branches, the buttress, the canopies and everything. And then secondly, the floral. And I would say the floral morphology, the floral characteristics of the plant is superior to the morphological. You may have a small herb related to a huge tree, courtesy of the flowers. So most of the classifications of botany are done using the flowers and then the morphological ones to compound more classification to it. Yeah. So when you tell a farmer this one is an acacia, and it's the only surviving acacia now because acacia was moved to Australia, and this is an Australian species that is in Kenya. So we are proud to say this one is a surviving acacia genus in Kenya. Okay.
But also, because we also come from, some of us have grown the wattle tree. But I've also realized crops don't do so well. Yes, under it. Why is that?
Basically the leaves that are shaded and the way they cover the floor. And I think the acacia mianzi, the tanning tree, as you said, establish more when they are planted, let's say, a huge plantation in small spacing, when they are gregarious. Maybe you can get when they are gregarious, and then they grow faster when they are gregarious.
When there are many.
When there are many. So in this case, but also they derive their benefits from the charcoal farmers. The charcoal The people can grow them for charcoal, which I think is in tanning is a bit popular for charcoal. Yes, apart from the fuel wood, normal fuel wood that runs our domestic village homes. So it's a good variety, but I don't know the tanning, the importance of tanning now. I've not done more research on that area about the tanning.
Okay. Is it also possible for you to maybe give us examples of trees that will go best with what crop, and trees that will go best with what kind of animals and in which particular regions?
If you are doing, let's say, crop farming, you focus mainly on the leguminous trees. Yeah, leguminous trees.
Examples?
So if you have, we've talked more about sesbania, sesban. This one is a good legume tree. You have erythrina, that is the pepper tree, the Erythrina abyssinica. It's a pepper tree, but it's a robust again. That doesn't need a small farm. With more of pod forming, if farmers actually get a pod forming plant, mostly they are in leguminous families, but that doesn't mean that there are other pods which may not necessarily be leguminous. So, and the other two fodder crops, the fodder trees I told you about is the Leucina and the Calliandra. They can plant this. They take small spaces along the terraces, so they benefit the crops with nutrients, nitrogen fixing, and at the same time you derive the fodder for your livestock. Yes, but in large scale, the acacia can do for Baringo sides, the savanna areas. Those ones are still leguminous trees, but mostly harvested pods are for livestock. Yeah, yes.
Okay. So when we also talk about trees and the way we've talked about eucalyptus, that they consume a lot of water, can you give examples of the kind of trees and where a farmer can grow them in their farm? There are those they can grow next to a stream. There are those they can make sure they are not anywhere close to a water body or a water source. Do you have examples of those?
Mostly we would say that there are riparian varieties like Newtonia. They can easily research about Newtonia. They can also get varieties which can grow in most parts, like Albizia, not necessarily the riverine. But those that cannot be grown near houses are those that you can visibly see the roots. Like, have you seen ficus? All the figs are discouraged from grown near the houses. All the fig trees. Most of them have, you can see the fibrous nature of their roots and how they spread on the ground. So they can easily tear apart your building. Then we have this Olea species. They can be grown maybe one near homesteads for shade, the Podo for shade, or even the Cordia. They're very nice species for shade provision. And now you can have meetings under these shades or so. But there are which I've seen people plant, but I do, let's say, they're not good. Have you seen the Indian shingo tree, the hash tree? That's Acrocarpus fraxinifolius.
Okay. When we talk like fruit trees, I don't know whether pears and plums, those fall under trees or they're shrubs.
We would say anything that is within 6 meters and below, or those could be shrubs. But when you say fruit trees, there are many. There are many fruit trees. You know the much sensationalized avocado. But the new varieties people now are doing for exports are not that big. The Hass variety they are tamed and propped to be shorter for harvesting, and they can even do well for intercropping now. But you know the guava, the guava can be tricky
Guava,
because
the
of
mapera.
yeah, diffuse branching. Diffuse branching may be a bit tricky.
I also understand there are trees that you need to seek permission from the government to grow them. I don't know whether we've reached there as a country, and I don't know whether we have examples of such.
We would not say that you can seek permission to grow these trees, but maybe maybe cutting, wanton destruction of the trees. You need to follow some. You need to consult the gatekeepers, the societal gatekeepers, the environmental bodies like NEMA, for example. You can also need to consult your the district environmental teams for maybe an upscale of felling trees, but that would not discourage farmers from planting. Okay. Those are just regulations that kick in later, but once you have the useful trees in your farm, you are allowed to use the trees. The point is about maybe also movement of this timber. That also needs you fulfill the local regulations set for that. Maybe you prove where your timbers are. Did you have the environmental team, the local authorities, inspections, yeah, and maybe the permit to do such kind of stuff.
I think with that, let's take a short commercial break. We'll take a breather and then we come back. Don't change that dial. We will be back shortly.